Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 51 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. La réunion aujourd'hui.
Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022, and therefore members can attend in person, in the room, and remotely using the Zoom application.
Should any technical challenges arise, please advise me. Please note that we may need to suspend for a few minutes as we need to ensure that all members are able to participate fully. And pursuant to Standing Order 1083H and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, May 16, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of access to information and privacy system. Toutes les témoins sont en...
All of the witnesses are in person today, Mr. Villemur, so we didn't need to do any sound tests.
To now welcome our witnesses today. From the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Colleen Calvert, Director General, Corporate Secretary. Alexandra Drago, Director of Access to Information and Privacy. From the Department of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, Derek Melchin, Director, Access to Information and Privacy and Executive Services. Leslie Soper, Director General, National Security Policy. From the Privy Council Office, we have David Nielsen, Executive Director, Matthew Shea, who's the Assistant Secretary to the Cabinet, Ministerial Services and Corporate Affairs. And from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, I want to welcome Danielle Golden, Director of Privacy, and then David A. Jansen, who's the Director General, Access to Information and Privacy. I believe the committee has been supplied with some briefs. Ms. Calvert, you are going to be starting today. The floor is yours. You have a 5-minute opening statement, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank the committee for the invitation today and for undertaking a study on the Access to Information and Privacy System. Global Affairs Canada works closely with the Treasury Board Secretariat, Office of the Information Commissioner, and other federal institutions to share best practices, to address complaints, and to position ourselves to successfully meet operational challenges. Most recently, Commissioner Ménard visited our department in early October to meet with then Acting Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Cindy Trumer-Schweisen. At Global Affairs, we recognize the importance of continuing to improve on-time responses, of implementing efficiencies, and of building capacity through education and skills development on ATIP. We can and must do better.
Last June, Global Affairs Canada, under the leadership of the Deputy Ministers, adopted an ambitious ATIP backlog reduction plan recognizing the need to do better. Targets were identified. The level of accountability of Assistant Deputy Ministers was strengthened, and accelerated training was put forward. So far this fiscal year, we have trained 544 departmental employees in ATIP. Our ATIP efforts are supported by both horizontal engagement across the department and vertical engagement at all levels, which are essential. Progress is monitored very closely, and gaps are identified and communicated as soon as possible. We are making progress. On-time processing, which dropped to a low of 19% in the first year of the pandemic, is now at 57%, which is a steady increase. We have achieved this at the same time as we are seeing a 30% increase in ATIP requests over the previous fiscal year.
Challenges we experienced during the pandemic have sharpened our understanding of what we need to change. First, we needed to identify ATIP as a critical service to access our buildings during repeated waves of the pandemic. At the outset of the pandemic, our ATIP processing software was housed on a secure network accessible only to the office, so Global Affairs identified access to information as a critical service. Between June and September 2020, virtually all GAC ATIP employees resumed working on-site, including processing secret and top-secret files. As we work to fully clear our backlog, I would like to highlight two other areas of focus. First, people. The shortage of qualified ATIP specialists is well known. We work on multiple fronts to fill positions, holding our own GAC recruitment processes, working with the Treasury Board Secretariat and other government departments on the Community Development Office Initiative, on collective staffing processes, and with our internal professional development program, encouraging employees to build a career in ATIP. Nous employons également plusieurs spécialistes.
We also employ several experienced ATIP specialists on a contract basis. Together, all of these efforts are necessary to address the federal government-wide ATIP staffing shortage that has existed for years. Second, our investment in technology. Last year, we implemented a new system for processing unclassified ATIP documents, allowing for efficiencies and increased flexibility for remote work. In the next fiscal year, we will begin the transition to a completely new generation of ATIP document processing software, taking advantage of the recent approval of new technology resources by the Treasury Board Secretariat. This transition will take our 2007 standards-based system into the 2020s, with obvious efficiencies and the potential for tools such as artificial intelligence. In closing, I would like to reiterate that the efficient and timely processing of access to information requests is taken very seriously by my department. The efforts that began earlier this year will continue.
I would be happy to take your questions at the end of the opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Calvert. And we're going to continue now next from the Department of Emergency Preparedness and Public Safety. I don't have a list of who's speaking, but whoever is next.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Mr. Chair, it's Leslie Soper. Honourable members, thank you for the invitation to join you today. In addition to my counterparts from other departments, I'm joined by my colleague Derek Melchin, the Director of ATIP and Executive Services here at Public Safety Canada. Sécurité Publique Canada joue.
Public Safety Canada plays a key role in ensuring coordination across all departments and agencies responsible for national security and the safety of Canadians. Our mandate is to keep Canadians safe from risks such as natural disasters, crime, and terrorism. In doing this, Public Safety works with the agencies and review bodies of the public safety portfolio, including the RCMP, which is represented here today. With regard to access to information, while Public Safety works closely with its portfolio partner agencies, each organization is responsible for its own ATIP program.
Public Safety has had a strong track record for timely completion of access to information requests, completing over 90% of requests within the legislative timelines in 14 of the last 15 fiscal years. During the COVID-19 pandemic, as was the case with the entire public service, the department was forced to shift temporarily to a remote work posture to protect the health and safety of employees. During this time, Public Safety was limited in its ability to process files containing classified or physical records that could not be accessed by employees working remotely. Over the past year, measures have been taken to restore full capacity to processed requests, and substantial progress is being made in addressing the department's backlog and delayed files. As Director General of National Security Policy, I am the public safety lead on declassification. As you know, Canada does not have a formal national security and intelligence declassification policy framework. The Treasury Board Secretariat policy on government security, which governs the management of security and protection of information, does not contain guidance for proactive declassification. In the absence of such a framework, the Access to Information Act has become the primary mechanism through which national and security and intelligence records are made available to the public. To help address this issue,
public safety in collaboration with the National and Security Intelligence Community, TBS, and Library and Archives Canada, has been working to develop a declassification framework which sets out an approach to proactive declassification practices across this community.
Dans cette communauté. The framework was tested by means of a pilot project which reviewed the records of the Joint Intelligence Committee, which operated between 1942 and 1960, that were held by the Privy Council Office. It aimed to provide an evidence base for future larger-scale proactive reviews of national and security intelligence records and to build consensus on the way forward on declassification. Declassification is generally understood to refer to the public release of records. It is worth bearing in mind that the level of classification reflects the extent of the injury to the national interest that would be caused if the information were released. When a document is declassified, it has been determined that the document's release in full or perhaps still partially redacted would no longer cause injury. But even after a document has been declassified, it may still need to be redacted to remove information that is sensitive for other reasons, such as the protection of personal information. The records must also be available in both official languages. And finally, they need to be digitized to support government policies on accessibility, such as being machine readable for those who are visually impaired. Pris ensemble, ces éléments demandent.
Taken together, these elements are labor-intensive and costly. Implementing a comprehensive framework to support the proactive release of historical records would require a considerable commitment of resources.
The work we have done is a step in the right direction, as proactive declassification review would significantly reduce the burden of processing access to information requests. The release of historical records would also assist public and academic researchers. Finally, public safety's declassification work reflects the government's national security transparency commitment to better inform Canadians regarding national security in support of democratic accountability without providing information that could compromise Canada's security or safety of Canadians. J'aimerais remercier
I would like to thank the committee for giving public safety the opportunity to discuss these requests and any others that may be of interest to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Soper. Next, for 5 minutes, Mr. Shea. The floor is yours. Mr. Shea is from the Privy Council Office. Sir?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and honourable members of the committee. Thank you for inviting the Privy Council Office to appear before you today to discuss Canada's access to information and privacy system. J'aimerais d'abord.
I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on traditional, unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory.
Anishinaabe. My name is Matthew Shea, and I am the Assistant Secretary to the Cabinet for Ministerial Services and Corporate Affairs at the Privy Council. I oversee all corporate affairs within the department, including the team responsible for coordinating all access to information requests and privacy requests within the department. Je suis accompagné
I am joined today by David Nielsen, the Executive Director in Access to Information and Privacy and Executive Correspondence Services at the Privy Council Office.
Soutier depuis.
David has spent over a decade supporting the ETHI function at PCO.
Together, David and I are responsible for leading and implementing the Access to Information and Privacy Act within PCO, including developing internal policies and procedures. We have a dedicated and very hardworking unit responsible for managing requests for departmental and personal information, ensuring corporate understanding and compliance with the acts, and fostering corporate awareness of the access and privacy rights and responsibilities for all Canadians. PCO fully appreciates the importance of making government more accessible to everyone and providing Canadians with greater transparency of government programs, activities, publications, and spending. And we are committed to those objectives. Nous nous efforçons de respecter.
We strive to meet our legislative timelines and ensure that government information is available to Canadians.
Population canadienne. Les fonds de renseignement du
PCO's combination of information holdings is unique compared to other institutions. The documents within our control include cabinet confidences, secret and top secret information holdings, including sensitive intelligence assessments, in addition to more traditional information holdings that many departments have.
Like many departments, the pandemic impacted our ability to meet our access to information obligations, particularly early in the pandemic. Many of our access to information requests involve secret and top secret information which is stored in vaults or on segregated networks for security purposes. This made the early days of the pandemic particularly challenging for PCO at a time where public health advice required us to minimize the number of employees in the office. This led to a sharp increase in the number of active files and ultimately a large backlog, which we continue to work hard to address. Compounding this challenge, throughout the summer of 2020, PCO received almost double the amount of ATIP requests compared to the same period before the pandemic. As a department, we have taken several steps to proactively address this challenge. We took steps to transition from a largely paper-based process to an electronic process where possible, allowing more non-sensitive files to be processed remotely. We have identified ATIP as a critical service, which allowed us to have more employees in the office to process files. Nous avons alloué un budget supplémentaire à notre.
We added additional budget to both our ATIP and information teams to assist them in addressing the backlog.
Nous avons fait de la.
We have made information management and ATIP a priority within the department and a regular topic of conversation at our departmental management committee.
As an aggregator of information, PCO holds a large volume of information from other government institutions. We are coordinating with other institutions to ensure we work together closely to find efficiencies in our efforts. Nos efforts et nos investissements.
Our focus and investment has resulted in two key outcomes.
Service, and that quickly allowed us to begin to flatten the curve of growth of our ATIP backlog. Simply put, we stopped the bleeding. Second, by establishing a dedicated team to address the backlog, we are systematically chipping away at it. We are deeply committed to eliminating this backlog as soon as possible, but we acknowledge it will take a concerted effort for several years. In 2021, we closed far less files than we received, resulting in a large backlog. In 21-22, we received 509 requests and closed 532 requests. And in the current fiscal year, we believe we are on track to make further improvements by closing many more files than we have received. In conclusion, I would say that we take very seriously any shortcomings to the service standards that Canadians have come to expect from public institutions. We are committed to eliminating the backlog and ensuring that requests receive a response in a timely and reasonable manner. We are very committed to ensuring Canadians have access to government information and the important role this plays in a healthy democracy, and we will pursue continuous improvements to accomplish this. Nous avons hâte d'aller.
We look forward to elaborating on some of these elements in response to your questions. Thank you again for that opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. And next are members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. I don't have a list of who's going to be speaking, but please go ahead.
Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et
Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee, good afternoon.
Director General of the Access Information and Privacy Branch at the RCMP. Je suis rejoint par ma.
I have with me my colleague Daniel Golden, new Director of Access to Information.
Today on this important issue from the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I'd like to start by addressing a point that will come as no surprise to this committee. For the last decade, the RCMP has struggled in its responsibility to be compliant under both the Access Information Act and the Privacy Act. The Information Commissioner's 2020 systemic investigation of the RCMP outlined this in stark detail and directly led to the Minister issuing a direction to develop a strategy to address the report's recommendations. I'm pleased to say that we have not only embraced the recommendations in this report, but we've taken it as a rallying cry for change. For the RCMP, this is a critical issue, as without transparency, we cannot build trust, and without trust, citizens are less likely to work with us in investigations. That is why we went further than addressing the systemic investigation in our 5-year strategy, Access Granted, Restoring Trust in the RCMP's Access Information and Privacy Program. La stratégie est un plan ambitieux.
The strategy is an ambitious plan to modernize from not only an access to information perspective, but what I am sure is of interest to you, privacy as well.
I encourage anyone with interest to review the strategy and follow our progress on our ATIP modernization page on our external website. While we are still early in this effort, we are seeing some results. Firstly, we have succeeded in resolving one of the Information Commissioner's key concerns, evidenced by the title of the review and her recent testimony to this committee, the need for leadership. Just 2 years ago, our program was led by a single director, supported by 3 managers. Neither mine nor my colleague's position existed. Aujourd'hui, nous avons un directeur.
Today, we have a Director General and 3 directors, each leading dedicated streams for information access, privacy, and operational support, supported by 8 managers.
Nous sommes aussi en pleine croissance.
Our staff is also growing from approximately 60 FTEs to a funded FTE of over 100.
Processes, created intergovernmental fora to share best practices, and implemented new training and guidance material for our personnel. We have and continue to invest in new technologies to help process requests more efficiently and to help us leverage the lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic to create a more national workforce. In terms of concrete results, in the last fiscal year, our information compliance rate increased to 40.1% from 26.4%, and the Privacy Act compliance increased to 46.1% from 32.8%. Ces résultats ont été
These results were achieved thanks to the hard work of our personnel, the support of our senior leadership, and despite the numerous challenges that continue to impact our chances at success.
For example, we all share in the challenge of attracting new staff. Let's be blunt. There are currently far more positions and candidates in ATIP, particularly at the most demanding levels. While the RCMP is trying to change this with clear career streams, the fact remains that there are insufficient numbers of candidates to fill our vacancies. Ceci, à son tour, nuise à la gestion de...
This makes it difficult to manage some of the RCMP's unique challenges. The RCMP is front and center at the major events of public interest in Canada, which inevitably results in significant numbers of requests.
And reviewing records in a situation where the very employees who hold them are assisting in a flood evacuation or investigating a tragedy is a unique challenge. This requires an experienced and informed ATIP personnel, which is extremely difficult to replace. The RCMP also remains a largely paper-based organization, where manual searches through boxes of files is still necessary. This committee is also no stranger to our need to conduct robust privacy assessments of new technologies. We have created an entire stream for privacy compliance, which includes reviewing and approving privacy impact assessments to ensure that we have the capacity to stay ahead of critical but invasive emerging technologies. In closing, I want to stress that the RCMP is committed to modernizing, and that I and my employees are passionate about improving this critical function at the RCMP. However, I do not want to paint a picture that we are satisfied with the early progress we have made. We know that we must keep building on this and that these efforts will take continued investment. Cependant,
However, these early results provide much-needed momentum to fuel the changes that need to take place.
je me ferai un plaisir
I am happy to provide this committee with any information you require for your review, and I look forward to seeing the results of your study to further help us refine our modernization efforts to better serve Canadians.
We look forward to your questions and forthcoming discussion. Monsieur le Président, merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jansen, and thank you to all our witnesses today for sticking to the timelines. You can imagine how difficult that is when there's 8 of you at the table. We're going to open the rounds of questions. We're going to start with Mr. Barrett, followed by Ms. Hepner, Mr. Villemure, and Mr. Green. Mr. Barrett, you have 6 minutes, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks to the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Nielsen, how many staff in PCO are subject to ATIP protocol?
How many staff in the ATIP office working on ATIP requests?
How many staff in the Privy Council office?
There's
approximately 1,200 employees at PCO, and they're all subject to the Act.
Okay. And so I'm going to work across the table and just get a response to my next couple questions, if I can, from each agency. And the question is, if you use any tech or artificial intelligence facilitated by the government contractor GC strategies related to your ATIP protocols.
I'm not aware of any technology at Public Safety Canada related to that company.
I'm not aware of any PCO using that technology.
Okay.
Not aware of any for GAC.
From the RCMP, we're not aware of that technology either.
Great. And we'll go the same order again. If you use any consultants to fulfill your ATIP requests or obligations.
We don't at Public Safety currently employ any consultants working on access to information.
Use consultants at this time.
We do at GAC, I would say between an average of maybe 8 to 10 contractors that also work directly in our ATIP division.
Of a total of how many?
Of a total of fully staffed, we'd be at 69, but we actually have, at the moment, we have, I think, 41 or 42 indeterminate staff.
Wow, okay.
42.
Thank you.
Yes, the RCMP has contracts with 2 consulting firms for a total of about 12 consultants. Our total FTE count is around 70 FTEs, and our final funded amount is just over 100, about 110 FTEs.
Okay, so just GAC and the RCMP. Are all of the consultants based in Canada?
Yes.
Same for the RCMP.
And are the names of the they would be sourced through a consulting firm, just not as individuals, I'd imagine?
Yeah. All are with firms, yes.
Same here, through the 2 firms previously mentioned.
Okay, and are the names of those firms available? That would have been done through a public procurement process. So
yes.
Are you able to tell us what the name of the firms are?
Can you tell us offhand? Go ahead.
Yes, we are working with Altus and Canadem.
Sorry, and what was the second one, sir?
Canadem.
Okay, thank you.
For the RCMP, I can confirm that we're also working with Altus, but forgive me, I don't have the second contract off the top of my head, so I'll have to return that to the committee. My apologies.
No, I appreciate your offer to return it to the committee. Thank you. And so, who in the Privy Council office, who would decide which information is confidential and is redacted? Who would be is that a responsibility that's shared, or is it a responsibility of one person that can be delegated? And if so, who is the responsible individual?
At PCO, it's a shared delegation between the ATIP office and the delegated authorities, the subject matter experts in the department.
Okay, so it could vary depending on the request.
Yes.
Okay. How often, as a percentage, I guess, or I'm not sure how you'd best be able to quantify it, would you cite cabinet confidences in your return of ATIP requests?
I don't have the numbers in front of me. Given
is that data that would those be stats that you do keep?
Yes.
Okay. Is that something that you'd be able to provide to the committee on your return to your office?
Yes, we could do that.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. What is the longest outstanding ATIP request? And I just asked that question to each of the agencies at the table, please, for your department.
I don't have the exact timeline, but Public Safety recently completed a parliamentary question where we were asked about this, and we have at least 2 requests that are around 5 years.
Okay. Thank you.
For PCO, I believe it's about 6 years.
6 years. Okay.
Around 5 for GAC.
And our backlog goes around 2017 as well.
Okay. And what? I don't know how much time do I have left, Mr. Chair? Because my question is why. So some of those. So for everyone, that predates COVID, and the staffing challenges that you're all facing, that each of your respective departments are facing. We've gone through a few different economic cycles since 2017. So I would ask why. I do want to know why, but I guess I would ask what is the consequence for not returning the ATIP in time? What's the consequence for having an outstanding ATIP in excess of 5 years?
With Public Safety, the ATIP requests that I spoke of were recently asked about in a parliamentary question, and so that information is publicly available. And while the 2 requests predate the Information Commissioner's order-making powers, so there is not the possibility of the Information Commissioner ordering Public Safety. It's obviously publicly known, and we're working to address those requests as quickly as we're able to.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Ms. Hepner for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would also like to thank the witnesses for being with us today.
Start with Mr. Jansen from the RCMP. I guess you all sort of talked about this a little bit. We know that right now departments are trying to put information out in the public before people have to apply for access to information. We also know that a record number of people are looking for information, and we've just come out of a period of turmoil with the pandemic. So starting with you, what are the operational difficulties you're facing right now?
Just forgive me, operational difficulties in terms of proactive disclosure or operational difficulties just for the ATIP branch at large?
For ATIP, just that's an extra, I think the proactive disclosure, I think, is an extra step that everyone's trying to accomplish.
Sure.
And so with all of those new factors, what are the operational difficulties that you're facing?
So, I mean, the RCMP is a relatively unique organization in the sense that one of our challenges is that when we have big events like we've seen in the last couple of years, like major floods or evacuations or the Emergencies Act, deployment of RCMP personnel, that takes members' attention away from processing requests and files. One of our other challenges is the fact that we are an organization with 30,000 members across the country. So unlike some of my colleagues who have more centralized kind of areas to go grab those reports or those files from personnel when there is an ATIP request, we have to leverage our network across the country to go grab those files, which adds a little bit of complexity. I would say our most significant challenge, though, is that our information management systems are not centralized. There's often a public perception from police procedurals or what so that, you know, an RCMP officer or a police officer can access any information about anyone from a centralized position. Nothing is further from the truth. So it creates a lot of challenge for us. Just last week, for instance, I had 9 bankers' boxes full of papers sent to me by Force Airplane just to go through. That requires a personnel from not only an investigative unit to go through with an ATIP analyst, but adds additional pressures on ourselves. And all those records have to be digitized, et cetera. I can go on at length. We have a fair number of challenges. Our software remains out of date. We're currently trying to upgrade that. And the number of staff in our shop. We're actively recruiting. We're doing a lot to bring in new talent to the organization with new perspectives, new ways of analyzing files. But our vacancy rate remains high, and we can't continue just poaching from our partner agencies because everyone's modernizing in the Government of Canada right now. So we are doing some innovative stuff to try and hire from a national perspective. We have employees in Vancouver now. We have employees in Toronto now, just to try to expand the base from which we draw those employees so we're not just stealing from each other and still bringing the level of expertise we require to process requests on time.
Thank you. That paints a really good picture of where you're at right now. And I'm wondering if I could just go to Global Affairs, Ms. Calvert, and ask the same question about specifically the operational challenges that you're facing at the moment.
Thank you for the question. I would say our challenges, staffing is definitely a big one in terms of the actual ATIP shop itself, in terms of keeping numbers of staff high enough and the experience needed to get people to the level to provide that the advice function. We, similar to what the RCMP mentioned, the people who are often the most pressed to act on emergencies are the ones who are getting the most ATIP requests on something that's very much in the public eye. So it's very challenging to meet those operational requirements at the same time as dealing with ATIPs at the same time. That's definitely a big challenge. In this time of clearing the backlog, one of the biggest challenges is clearing the backlog while staying on time for your current responses. So we're very mindful of not wanting to fall behind in new requests, but we're trying to clear backlog, and that balance is really a challenging one to achieve. And then finally, I just mentioned the technology. We really do need, and we are on the cusp of, next fiscal year moving to a new processing system. However, our technology is not very capable compared to the information age that we're in and the amount of information that we have just going through emails every day and so forth. So you need help reviewing that information. If it's just humans reviewing it, it's not quite fast enough.
Thank you very much. And I'll turn to Soper from Department of Public Safety. Do you want to just sum up your current operational challenges?
Since it's a question on ATIP, I'll speak about that. The challenges that we face at public safety are similar to those discussed by my colleagues. We, within the ATIP community, there's a shortage of trained personnel, and like David mentioned, we're all stealing from each other, and we've all recognized the need to move to something more constructive, and Treasury Board Secretariat has actively been putting in place initiatives to help with centralized staffing of the ATIP, to increase the size of the ATIP community. So we're actively participating in that work and supporting it. But in the meantime, working to recruit and train up analysts from the ground floor is something that we're actively working on, and that does take a time investment. So while managers and supervisors in the ATIP office are doing that recruitment and training work, they're not necessarily working on files. So we have to divide our time and our energies. That's one of the biggest things for us as a small department. The other issues that were mentioned by my colleagues, like technology, information management within the department, are certainly things that all ATIP offices face. I think that for public safety as a small department, the resourcing is the real key one for us. So we're actively interested in being part of that effort.
I don't think I have time for Mr. Shea, but maybe one of my colleagues can get there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hepner. Monsieur Villemure.
Mr. Villemure, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I suggest that the committee pursue its debate on the motion that was tabled on November 30th.
Are you proposing that in the form of a motion, Monsieur Villemure?
Yes, that we continue our discussions on the motion that was tabled on November 30th. We had adjourned last Thursday.
Attendez une minute.
One moment, please. I'm just going to speak with the clerk.
Monsieur Villemure, j'ai parlé.
Mr. Villemure, I spoke with the clerk, and if you'd like... One moment.
Si vous propose qu'on...
If you're proposing that we move to discuss the motion, then we need to vote on it.
And it's not amendable, from what I understand. So if you want to resume debate, we will have to go to a vote. Okay. To resume debate on the motion that was presented or proposed on November 30th of 2022, and that is the motion, je pense, sur...
The motion on China, correct?
Pour une enquête de ce comité.
So that the committee undertake a study of foreign interference in China.
This last time, Mr. Barrett, so non-debatable, non-amendable. I've been advised by the clerk, Mr. Fergus.
Question to you before you take the vote as to whether or not we should move to that debate. When we last left, Mr. Broussard, Mr. Chair.
You had the floor. I'm fully aware of that, and I've made that. I asked the clerk to make that note, and she did in my notes in the event that we were in this situation. So if this motion passes, Mr. Fergus, I will ensure that you have the floor, sir. It's okay. Thank you. We're going to now go to the vote.
Mr. Baines?
I vote yay.
Mr. Fergus?
Vote en faveur.
Ms. Hepner? Ms. Khalid?
In favor.
Ms. Sachs?
In favor.
Mr. Barrett?
We resume debate?
Yes.
Yes.
Monsieur Gourde?
Yes.
Mr. Kuriak?
I vote in favor.
Monsieur Villemur? Mr. Green?
Je vote en faveur.
10 yeas, sir.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion to resume debate carries. Before I proceed to Mr. Fergus, I will remind the committee that this does have consequences on the witnesses that are here today. I am going to hold the witnesses for approximately 10 minutes in the hopes that we can dispose of this matter quickly. And if we're unable to do that, then I will dismiss the witnesses and we'll continue on with debate. Mr. Fergus, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I can assure you that if we continue this debate, perhaps we should let our guests leave, because I have a lot to say on this motion and the reason why I believe this motion is not good.
I'm going to interrupt you on that point before you continue. Can I have consensus from the committee that we allow the witnesses to be released?
If you don't mind, Chair, I was wondering if perhaps we could propose the questions that we had for witnesses today based on their statements and ask for written submissions in response.
We could do that, or we can invite the witnesses back at a later time. I'm certainly at the will of the committee on this one, so is it the consensus of the committee that we would like to have the witnesses submit based on the line of question? I'll remind you, we only got through two lines of questioning here. Mr. Villemur was supposed to be next, and Mr. Green. So I've got two choices here. I can either invite, I see Mr. Kuriak, I can either invite the witnesses back at a later date to conclude the line of questioning, or we can dismiss them. So what would be the preference of the committee on Ms. Khalid's point? Mr. Kuriak, I see your hand.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I would just note that, you know, it's unfortunate that this can't be disposed of quickly. I think it would be entirely fair for there was a fairly extensive conversation that took place at the last meeting. And since the witnesses have made their way to the committee, of which to note, I just thank all of the witnesses for doing so. I think it would be unfortunate to drag this out in a prolonged filibuster, as Mr. Fergus just seemed to suggest that will be the case. So certainly my preference would be for this to be disposed of and voted on, and then we can get back to the business at hand.
Okay. Thank you. There's still debate that's to occur, Mr. Kuriak. I'm going to make a decision on behalf of the committee. I'm going to dismiss the witnesses. I'm going to ask them that potentially we may make them available at a later date. And in the meantime, based on some of the discussion that's happened, we'll take two paths here. If you can submit anything in writing to the committee that you think is relevant to the access to information study that we're pursuing, please, I invite you to do that. But on the other hand, I may actually invite you back to finish the lines of questioning that were available. So I'm going to dismiss the witnesses. I'm going to suspend for a minute so that we can do that, because there's many witnesses, and then we're going to resume the debate. Mr. Fergus, you'll have the floor. I'm resuming the meeting, and I want to thank the witnesses again for appearing. Just again, a reminder to them that if they are to submit some stuff in writing, that we would need it sooner than later. We are going to recommence with debate. Mr. Fergus, I've indicated, has the floor. I just want to remind all members of the committee, Chapter 20 of the Committee on Questions of Procedure and Privilege, Disorder and Misconduct. It says in here that, in addition, the chair at his or her discretion can interrupt a member whose observations and questions are repetitive or are unrelated to the matter before the committee. If the member in question persists in making repetitive or off-topic comments, the chair can give the floor to another member. If the member refuses to yield the floor and continues talking, the chair may suspend or adjourn the meeting. There was a lengthy discussion about this last time. There was a lot of information that was put to the committee. Let's try not to keep it repetitive. Let's try to, if we are going to debate this, have some new information. Mr. Fergus, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree 100%.
Speaking with Ms. Khalid. What was that, Mr. Fergus?
I was going to continue, but do you want to? Okay.
Nope. She was just indicating to me that she wanted to be next on the list. So, okay, thank you.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, I agree with you wholeheartedly. We should limit our comments to relevant information, and I will do so. I would also like to address some comments to Mr. Kurek and to Canadians who are listening to us this afternoon. I would like to reassure them that I don't know if there's a translation for filibuster in French, but this is not a filibuster here. I will instead find a way to improve my colleague Mr. Villemure's motion. Because it seems to be doubling the efforts of another House of Commons committee, which will be studying the same elements that can be found in Mr. Villemure's motion. Firstly, Mr. Chair, it's funny. There was a reception for the previous Speaker of the House of Commons, and I have in front of me not a prop, but a book with his decisions of Speaker Reagan. Those decisions don't apply word for word for all of our committees, but they are similar. And one of the principles that we have is that we shouldn't duplicate the work in adopting a bill. And same thing for a committee. Once a committee decides to do a study, as is the case with PROC, and I am a member of that committee, and this committee, in order to study foreign interference. It's the same thing. We cannot duplicate the work. It is a waste of time for members. It is a waste of time for the resources. And I just asked the question very clearly. What witnesses would we invite to this committee that would not be invited to Brock to examine the exact same issue? That's a question that my colleague refuses to answer. I don't know why. He's a man who has a lengthy career in ethics. He is somebody that I respect greatly, and we get along well. But I need to ask this question again. Imagine, Mr. Chair, if we were to do this at all House of Commons committees, at the Environment Committee, at the Finance Committee. We're going to we'll bring the work of members to a halt. And committees is where we do the real work. Most people think it's during question period. Question period is very important. I do not deny that. But unfortunately, it's a bit of theater. We ask questions. Sometimes we don't get answers. Or we get answers that don't reflect the question. But the real work happens at committees. Mr. Brossard, I raise my hat to you and your predecessor, Mr. Kelly. Both of you have greatly managed this committee since I became member at the start of this parliament. There were no political games here. We always sought to get consensus, and that is exactly what we should do. And that's what we should do outside of camera view as well. But I know that we are live right now, but I know that there are fewer people listening than during QP, for example. But our work needs to be relevant and efficient. And as I said, congratulations again for encouraging members to overcome partisanship. We've done well in trying to get information from witnesses. During the first rounds of questions today on access to information, we weren't able to ask questions because my honorable colleague wanted us to come back to this debate. He tabled his motion. I think that as all other members I could count, I knew that it would pass, so I voted for so that we could deal with this now and make a decision. I believe that this motion is not in the interest of our committee. It is not in our committee's mandate. The facts are that we decided that the motion is in order, but I think there are ways for that motion to be improved. And so I don't mind proposing amendments in order to improve it. Mr. Chair, I think it's very important that we look at how it can be improved. I think that one of the biggest shortcomings of this motion that we are currently debating is And can you speak a little louder because... Oh, I'm not often told that I'm too quiet, so I apologize to the interpreters and to Canadians who are listening to us live. Mr. Chair, I think that one thing we can do to improve the motion would be to see who we would invite for this study. If we could decide not to invite the same people that were invited to PROC for them to repeat the same things, that would be one thing. Furthermore, Mr. Chair, I heard my honorable colleague say that we need to examine this more exhaustively than how it is being examined at PROC. And I would say that the best thing here would be to ensure that we could extend the scope of this motion. I see my colleague who proposed the motion nodding. Hopefully he will be in agreement, but perhaps we should extend the scope of the study instead of focusing only on a single country, in this case China. Everybody knows China is not innocent in interfering with our election process. Perhaps we should examine all countries that act in bad faith. We know that Russia does as much as China. We know that Iran is increasingly doing interference. We know that there are individuals in many countries, even in allied countries, who are acting in bad faith. Perhaps we should extend the scope of what we are currently studying. That way, we'll find a way to work and not duplicate the work of another committee. I think at least in that case, we will make things more interesting because, as I said, and I don't want to repeat myself, and I don't want to go against the framework that you set for us, Mr. Chair, before I spoke. I don't want to repeat myself again. So if we're going to do exactly the same thing or almost exactly the same thing as another committee, it would be a waste of time. If my colleagues are interested in doing differently and expanding the scope of the motion, well then, it might make the pill that we have easier to swallow. And I think it would be a good idea. So, I think that would be a way to do things. I see my colleagues nodding, so that indicates to me that perhaps they might have something to suggest. Mr. Chair, I think that could be something interesting. And it would make it much more acceptable. I cannot see on my screen. I don't know if I can ask for multimedia services to change the screens so that we could have gallery view of people with their cameras on. Because I can only see the people who are in the room. But I'm hoping that we could get consensus with the people here in the room to expand the scope of the motion. Thank you. I will now give the floor over, and I hope that somebody will propose an amendment that would take into account my comments, and I believe that would allow us to do real work, because we won't be duplicating the work of others. So, Mr. Chair, I will end my comments there. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fergus. And technicians are switching to gallery view.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fergus. Next, I have Ms. Khalid on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wholeheartedly agree with everything that Mr. Fergus has indicated. I unfortunately was not able to attend the meeting where we had this really fulsome discussion, and I really would have loved to participate in and share some of my thoughts on this. First and foremost, I just want to say, regardless, the study is happening already at PROC. I don't want to take away from how important it is for us as a country to really take a deep dive into what foreign interference is today in its current shape and form. But I think in order for us to fully understand what that foreign interference is, I think we have to put it into the context of where it came from over the past number of decades. My colleague is absolutely right. This is not just a communist China issue. This is, I think, the changing dynamics of how the world operates and how we work with one another, how we build allies across the world, and how we partner with other nations to build upon the democratic values that we care so deeply about. Chair, I do sit on the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, so I think my perspective on this is quite heightened. I really strongly believe that we do need to do a lot more to ensure that we are safe from political interference. I do believe that we need to look beyond the one nation that is listed here in this motion. Mr. Fergus is absolutely right. Where we have Russia, we have Iran, we have other hostile actors that do need to be looked at. And I think that we do need to see how foreign interference or espionage has evolved over the past decades, and how technology perhaps plays a role in it, how the government of Canada ensures that we're safe, and what that in what context over these past number of decades. I think it is quite paramount that as if we are to dig into this very important issue, and to make sure that it is not a repeat of the work that is happening in PROC already. I do believe that expanding the scope of this motion would perhaps be the better way to go. So in that spirit, Chair, I would like to move an amendment to the main motion, and that is after the word interference to remove particularly in the 2021 federal election through the use of funds from foreign-influenced organizations affiliated with the United Front of the Communist Party of China. I can just halt there for a second if you just want to pull it up, Madam Clerk.
I'm not sure that we have a copy of it yet.
I'm sorry. I'm just amending the main motion that was presented by Mr. Villemure. Yes, that's what I understood.
Okay, and I've got the main motion in front of me as well. So. Just give it a second until the clerk pulls it up for her own benefit. This should be the last page. Perfect. There you go. Go ahead, Ms. Khalid.
Thanks, Chair. I will just repeat. So what I'm proposing is that after the word interference, which is on that first line, we remove what follows, particularly in the 2021 federal election through the use of funds from foreign-influenced organizations affiliated with the United Front of the Communist Party of China. So just to remove that. And I say this because I think that this will not only expand the scope of the motion to include more hostile state actors in what we're studying, and I think it will also include what's been happening in the past. How have we dealt with this issue of foreign interference in the past? I mean, obviously, 2021 was not the first election that we've had with, where there have been suspicions of foreign interference. I think going back and looking how we've dealt with it in previous elections, I think going back and putting into context how that political interference is changing in today's day and age in this digital space would be a really good way for us to expand the scope of the motion and to really do something meaningful, really take a deep dive into how we can, as a committee, provide recommendations for the improvement of our democratic values, our democratic institutions here in Canada. So, Chair, I propose that amendment. I'm really hopeful that members will support my motion to expand the scope beyond just the CCP.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Khalid. We do have an amendment to the main motion, and just repeat it for the sake. Je vais répéter aussi pour.
I will repeat it for the sake of the committee.
Part after the comma on interference that says particularly in the 2021 federal election through the use of funds from foreign influenced organizations affiliated with the United Front of the Communist Party of Canada, Communist Party of China. And en français, le texte en français.
So in French, after notamment, so removing particularly in the 2021 federal election through the use of funds from foreign-influenced organizations affiliated with the United Front of the Communist Party of China. Ms. Khalid proposes that we remove that from the motion.
Motion as amended would read like this. that the committee undertake pursuant to Standing Order 1083H, a study of foreign interference and the threats to the integrity of democratic institutions, intellectual property, and the Canadian state itself that arise from this foreign interference, and that the committee report to the House. So that's the way the motion would read as amended. Now, on the main motion, I had a list. I'm now on the amendment, and I saw Mr. Green's hand up first, followed by Mr. Baines, and then Monsieur Villemure après Monsieur Baines. So if anybody wants to get it, pardon? Oh, okay. Point d'ordre, Monsieur Villemure.
Point of order, Mr. Villemure. He's too far from the microphone.
Pardon. La traduction.
The translation here is problematic because in French, notamment, that includes these countries, but particularly excludes. It was written in French first, so notamment in French means China and other countries. So it's a translation issue.
Okay. Est-ce qu'on peut corriger?
Could we correct the translation here? I would ask for the interpreter's help because particularly does not equate to notamment in French.
Okay.
Non. Particularly, vise comme ça, notamment, inclut, plus large.
Notamment is larger than particularly. Notamment includes what Ms. Khalid was saying.
Okay. Mais, Monsieur Villemure, quand vous avez proposé la...
But when you propose the motion, if I had to translate it, instead of particularly, I would say including in the 2021 federal election and not particularly. I'm not sure where the translation error happened, but the intent with notamment includes other countries and doesn't limit itself to China.
Je comprends. So, Ms. Khalid, if your motion is, or your amendment is to be carried, then would it not, in effect, have the same, and I'm asking because I'm looking for clarification on this, would it not have the same impact as what Mr. Villemure is proposing here? So, because he talks about particularly, but it's also open to other organizations or other countries as well, perhaps. So I'm looking for some clarification on that.
Absolutely. I'm happy to clarify. I mean, the motion as it stands, that the main motion, the only country it mentions is China. And I think that it is, the fact that you're confused by the wording of the motion, Chair, I think speaks volumes.
Just so I'm clear, where I'm confused is it does say a study of foreign interference.
But it then...
Foreign interference, and then particularly...
Which, in my view, really narrows that scope down to the 2021 federal election and the CCP. I did not interpret this to be a broad-ranging, and I don't think that that Canadians, as they try to understand what the scope of this study is, would be particularly, I guess, enlightened by this wording as it stands right now. I think removing those two references would help us broaden the scope and to actually step away from just that narrow focus and have a more of a peripheral vision on what it is that we want to study, Chair.
Okay. Like I I'm telling you that I see it as the same way. A study of foreign interference narrowed down more broadly, but narrowed down into the United Front of Communist Party of China. So if we are, in my view, if we're to delete that portion of it, the problem is that, you know, I don't think that we can end up broadly studying the issue of foreign interference. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's the problem as I see it. Go ahead, Ms.
Chair.
Colleen.
So what I'm proposing through my amendment is that we study foreign interference and the threats to the integrity of democratic institutions, intellectual property, and the Canadian state itself arising from this foreign interference. I think that, to me, is a sufficient scope that removes reference to any one specific instance. This gives us the ability to broaden what it is, what kind of witnesses we bring in to testify before us. It gives us the ability to look at what kind of evidence we want to dive into. It doesn't limit us to a specific election. It allows us to be nimble, to be versatile. You know, for example, if we have a witness here before the committee and something comes up, we won't have to put forward a new motion. We can really take ownership of what that foreign interference is. How do we protect our democratic institutions and make sure that we are talking about how we protect the Canadian democratic values as opposed to saying, oh, look at this bad state actor, look at that bad state actor. I think through my amendment, we'll be able to have that effect. As opposed to, you know, if my amendment does not pass, we're looking specifically and only at the 2021 election. We're looking only at China. This is how I read it, understand and appreciate. This is a study that's already happening somewhere, right? And we're looking forward to seeing what the outcome of that study is going to be. What I'm trying to say here is that foreign interference is a really big issue. It matters. We need to look into it, and we need to look into it with a bigger scope rather than narrowing it more to broaden the horizons of what it is that we're trying to achieve here.
Thank you, Ms. Khalid. I think you've provided some clarity to the committee on what your intent is on the amendment. Okay, so on the amendment, I do have Mr. Green. Mr. Green, please, the floor is yours, sir. And then we're going to go to Mr. Baines on the amendment after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to take this opportunity to go on the record to do something I don't normally do, which is agree with my Liberal friends across the way. I'm not interested in getting bogged down in this kind of, hyper-focused avenue of China. I think that it'd be naive for us to think that they're the only ones. And I don't think it would be productive to spend all of our time in this, this kind of hyper-focused way when, quite frankly, it's been my experience and observation in Southern Ontario that there are plenty of actors, foreign actors on the ground from nomination processes all the way through to election days. And I think that for the public interest of this committee, we ought not get bogged down in the language either. I think the point has been made. It's not certainly a revelation that China was implicated in alleged interference in the last two elections. So I could see the bulk of our focus being given the last two elections, given their proximity to our own personal elections. But beyond that, I think that it's important that the committee takes the opportunity to expand the study and include any and every particular investigation or information that we might have, because ultimately the cynicism in this country, Mr. Chair, is only served by us pulling back the veil and having a full and frank discussion about it so that Canadians, when they go to the poll, know that they've engaged in a free and fair election. That's, I think, in speaking with my good friend from the bloc, Renee, that's how I understood his motion, the spirit of his motion. That's why I supported it. That's why I supported, it's continuing this discussion, because as important as the work that we do around access to information, everything else, it's very important work. the allegations of having some kind of interference and tampering with our democratic processes is I think of grave concern for all of us. So I'm hoping that we could just move forward. I'm in support of the amendment. I could care less whether it talks about the united front of the Chinese Communist government. We know that that's the impetus for this study, but I think that when we start talking about it, we're going to find that this goes well beyond just China. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Green. We've got Mr. Baines next, and then I believe it was Monsieur Berthold qui suivait Monsieur Baines. Mr. Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick. I'll echo the comments just made by Mr. Green and my colleague Ms. Khalid. I support this amendment as it allows us to take a broader focus. I think it's definitely an important matter, and there are way more actors, bad actors, if you may. And I even think that maybe we should even explore domestically the interference that takes place against our institutions and the way we conduct our democratic process. So I live in a community where it's a large Chinese community there, and Chinese Canadians, and I'll just give a quick example. We went through a recent court case where a coffee was spilled on a Chinese Canadian, and the community generally was in fear that nobody liked them anymore. And I just want to just state that, I think that a key focus on the one community, when we're definitely aware that there's many different actors out here interfering in elections, from, like Mr. Green mentioned, everything from nominations to general elections. I think that if we're to adopt this study, we must do our jobs as legislators to take great care and not reinforce these stereotypes to one specific community. So I'll just leave it at that. And like I mentioned, I support this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Baines. Monsieur Berthold, sur l'amendement, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, juste pour dire effectivement que...
I just wanted to add, are you hearing interpretation now? Go ahead, Mr. Berthold.
Les interprètes me connaissent.
The interpreters know me well, and they know that I speak very quickly, so I'll try to speak more slowly. But two things. Before we vote, it would be important to know what we're voting on. That notamment, particularly, there is a significant nuance there. And perhaps to correct a little element. At PROC, the motion that we're studying is an emergency motion for the election in 2019, following the allegations from November 7th. So we have a study, and we've approved 4 additional meetings for the election of 2019, following the report in Global News. So to focus on 2021 and to see what happened between 2019 and 2021 seems completely relevant to me, because our mandate at ethics would be to see what happened, examine the allegations of corruption and interference in MPs' offices. If we find out that an MP's office was infiltrated by a foreign agent, in this case, Beijing, we learned that in January, MI5, so the British version of CSIS, had clearly identified an agent from Beijing, made that person's name public and stated to the office that that person had worked for them, that they had funded candidates and members, had worked with them on certain files. So I just wanted to highlight that because I am part of PROC, I find it important to share that information with members of ethics. We were focusing on the election of 2019. So, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to share that information with the members of your committee who have welcomed me to the table today.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Berthold. You are more than welcome at this committee.
Mr. Baines, I saw your hand up, but you put your, I think you took your hand down? Okay, perfect.
It is residual. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we've got an amendment on the floor. I don't see any further discussion. I did not see any further discussion until the hand went up. We're good. Okay, no further discussion. I'm going to take a vote on the amendment proposed by Ms. Khalid. So, Madam Clerk, if you will take the vote. Is there consensus on the amendment, first of all? If there is, you would? Okay, so Ms. Khalid has requested a recorded vote. We'll proceed to a recorded vote. Madam Clerk, if you will.
Mr. Baines.
I vote yes.
Ms. Atwin.
Yay.
Ms. Hepner. Ms. Khalid.
I vote yes.
Ms. Sachs.
En faveur.
Mr. Barrett.
Nope.
Monsieur Berthold.
No.
Mr. Keurig. Mr. Keurig. Mr. Keurig is walking.
Yeah, so I'm walking to the committee room. You started the vote right as I was walking out of my office.
How do you vote? Now's your time to shine, Damien.
I think that's an abstention.
Damien, what's your vote?
He's outside. He can't hear you.
Okay, so
that's an abstention.
Abstention.
So, unfortunately, I'm sorry, Mr. Keurig, but we're going to have to consider your vote an abstention because there's no way of communicating. We have to proceed. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Monsieur Villemur.
Contre.
Monsieur Green.
I vote in favor.
Six yeas, 3 nays.
Okay. Merci. So the motion as amended carries. So now we're on any debate at all on the main motion. Ms. Hepner, I had you on the main motion before. Please go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. I would sort of like to continue in the same vein of opening up this study a little more. So what we have right now is a focus on 2021, 2019. But I think really if we're going to look at foreign interference, we know that it's happened a lot longer than that. And I would go back further. So just to save you all the debate, should I just read you what I propose to amend?
So the motion as amended is not prescriptive to any particular date. It doesn't
Okay,
say
let me,
2021.
and I would
It
like to
doesn't-
make it prescriptive in my amendment, more prescriptive. So at the end of the whole paragraph, after the word interference, I would add that the committee review the work of previous ministers of democratic institutions related to the last 5 federal elections to combat foreign interference. So this way it's It's a nonpartisan look at the whole of government and what all has happened since 2008. So we'd go back to when there was a previous government running the country, and really look at this issue. It would be nonpartisan, it would be more wide-ranging, and we'd really get to the bottom of it. You might be interested to note that the last two Democratic Institutions ministers for Stephen Harper were Tim Uppal and Pierre Poilievre. So it is interesting. It does go back further. I think that the more recent work of our ministers of democratic institutions is all public. It's online. You can go on and search for it. But going back further, it's more opaque, and it's harder to find that information. So this is why I'm proposing this amendment, and I look forward to further debate.
So do you do me a favor and just read that out one more time for me,
Yeah,
please?
so-
And I do see your hand up on the amendment, Mr. Green, so go ahead, just read it out one more time for me.
At the end of the paragraph, after interference, I would add that the committee review the work of previous ministers of democratic institutions related to the last 5 federal elections to combat foreign interference.
Thank you for that. We do have an amendment on the floor. Yeah, because this is pretty significant to the amendment that was made and the motion as it relates now. So I would like to suspend just so that we can send the amendment to the rest of the committee. We'll just suspend for a minute or however long it takes. Thank you. Ms. Hepner has been circulated to the committee members. Remind everyone we have till 5:30, so if we can dispose of this quickly, I would appreciate that. If not, I understand. Mr. Green, you're first up on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, I'm trying to figure out, I've not decided yet, whether or not the filibuster is going to be worse than whatever other amendments the government side has coming next. I think this is a redundant motion. I think that within our committee study processes, we have the full ability to call for whatever witnesses we want, and surely our analysts would include the work of previous committees. And so I feel like, and we'll see how many other amendments they have to offer, but I don't think this is necessary in any stretch of the imagination. And I think, I'm starting to wonder, I should have known when there was a unanimous vote to actually continue this debate that something was coming our way, but here we are, and I look forward to hopefully getting this motion passed. And again, when we come back to picking the witnesses, then absolutely move a motion to call, Pierre Poilievre and Tim Uppel to have them testify. I mean, knock yourself out, but right now I feel like we're just going to see a series of more amendments that might take us off the main motion, which is really what I'm looking for.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. I do not see any other hands up. So we will proceed to a vote on the amendment. Madam Clerk, if you can do that, that would be great. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bain.
Vote yes.
Mr. Fergus.
Vote en faveur.
Ms. Hepner. Ms. Khalid.
I vote in favor.
Ms. Sachs. In favor. Mr. Barrett.
No.
Monsieur Berthold.
No. No.
Mr. Kurek.
I vote no.
Monsieur Villemur.
Je suis contre.
Mr. Green.
No.
Five yeas, 5 nays.
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam
Chair.
Clerk. I vote no. Can I get the results, please?
5 yeas, 6 nays.
So the amendment fails. We are back on the main motion. Go ahead, Ms. Sachs.
Mr. Chair, and in the efforts to make this quick and find collaboration among all of us here, it's been made clear by many members of the committee that this issue is important to them. And I think it's an issue that's really, really important to Canadians. And that's why I would like to propose an amendment that says, if I may read it into the record, that the study be the committee's next order of business, and that the committee undertake no other business until the study is complete. And I'd like to just clarify, we dismissed witnesses today in order to debate this, so it's clearly an issue of concern by my colleague from the Bloc and my colleagues across the way from the Conservatives. And, all parties agreed to table this study. We're here, we're debating it, we're making sure that we get a study that is comprehensive, that, as I mentioned in our last meeting, I'm not a fan of doubling up work. I'd like to see work, and I'm willing to stay all night to do it. That makes sure that we really get through what Canadians are asking of us and instill trust in our democratic institutions. I think that is really what this is about. And, yeah.
You've put an amendment on the floor.
Yes, and I can read it into the record, Mr. Chair.
If you can read it again, I would appreciate that, just so that members are clear. I'm not going to seek.
I have it in French if needed.
Okay, so if you want to distribute that, that would be great. Once the amendment's on the floor, then we'll open it up for debate. I have you as you'd started debate, so before the amendment had been acknowledged. So I want to make that clear.
So I'll just. Would you like? I can send it to you. Sure.
ETHI, ETHI@carl.gc.ca.
Okay, that's fine. I'll send it right now.
So we'll get that distributed to members of the committee as quick as we can. And then I'm not going to suspend. So while we wait for that to be distributed in both languages to the committee, I'm going to encourage Ms. Sachs, if you want to continue. Please.
As I mentioned, Mr. Chair, in Proc, both the Bloc and the Conservatives voted against a motion to extend the foreign interference study by 4 meetings, and they wanted to focus specifically on the CCP interference, and we've gotten some agreement here to show that we've all talked about here about widening the scope and broadening the scope and making sure that we get a comprehensive view both historically and what's happening. So there clearly is an interest in prioritizing this. There's clearly an interest in looking at this in depth. And since it seems to be a priority for myself and colleagues here and across the way, I really feel strongly that this is the business of the day that we should be engaged in, and we should get through it and leave no stone unturned, as many of us like to do in this committee, to make sure we have a comprehensive and fulsome review. So that's really all I have to say on the subject. And happy to open to debate.
Thank you, Ms. Sachs. On the amendment, I had Mr. Fergus, followed by Ms. Khalid.
Mr. Chair, I aside from what my colleague said in terms of this seems to be an important file and that we should proceed right away, then to be consistent with that, I will stop talking.
Ms. Khalid?
Thanks, Chair. Again, just to reinforce, I think, the fact that we dismissed so many important witnesses today because there was a will from Monsieur Villemure, respectfully, to really bring up this issue and to study it. I think Ms. Sachs's amendment really gets to the crux and the heart of what this committee wants. And we've seen, the way that we've been functioning so far. We're kind of doing a little bit of ATIP, we're doing a little bit of ArriveCAN, we're thinking about the lobbying commissioner. But I think that if we really are serious about making some strong, fulsome recommendations to the government with respect to what is the foreign interference level, what is the danger, the risks here in Canada, I think then we need to show that by making sure that we're prioritizing this study, that we're moving aside all other things on the agenda until we get to the bottom of what is so important. We hear it in question period. We hear it from the media. We hear it by members opposite, and including ourselves, just how important this issue is. So let's put everything aside. Let's actually do this study. Let's bring out those witnesses. Let's put forward some concrete recommendations on what is the next step forward. Let's get to the bottom of this issue, Chair. And I really think that we should be prioritizing this. And I'm really looking forward to the support of all colleagues, especially in the opposition, to ensure that we are prioritizing this the way that they've been wanting it to be prioritized over the past couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Khalid. Je pense que M. Villemure.
I think that Mr. Villemure had raised his hand before Mr. Barrett, so we'll go to Mr. Villemure. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Earlier, my colleague was wondering how to translate filibuster. In French, we say obstruction systématique. That was just an observation. But earlier, we went from a sterile debate to something very important. We're talking about the integrity of the state, and it's very important here. I tabled this motion so that we could have another perspective. And I believe that I have a bit of expertise with that perspective. I wouldn't want our colleagues to then dilute the meaning of the motion. Until now, it has not been diluted. But I would like for us to go beyond filibustering and for us to make a decision. Thank you.
Merci, M. Villemure.
Thank you, Mr. Villemure.
Yep, thanks, Chair. So the witnesses had to be dismissed today because there was a filibuster at the end of the last meeting that we had. That we voted on the question at hand, then we wouldn't have had the business to deal with again today, and it looks like this will carry forward to another meeting. We can walk and chew gum. I can. So I'm prepared to have multiple studies happen at one time. So I support the main motion. I don't support the amendment. We'd be canceling on our witnesses that we have upcoming. And, yeah, I think that we can do both at the same time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Ms. Khalid.
Thanks, Chair. Just to clarify, I mean, prioritizing this motion is not diluting it. It is making sure that that priority and how we feel about this motion is actually shown by way of our calendar, our schedule, and how we are ensuring that this study is completed in a timely and effective manner. I know that we have been talking about this, and the only way that we move forward is to have the fulsome debate, to make sure that what we are doing in this committee is important work to Canadians. And I think that members have made it very, very clear how important this foreign interference issue is. And I think that needs to be reflected in our schedule. I think that needs to be shown. Let's get this over and done with before moving on to other things. I think that this is, amongst all of the studies that we have, this is the one that members have really expressed a lot of urgency to. I think that we should have that reflected within our schedule, Chair.
I do not see any other hands up. So we are on the amendment proposed by Ms. Khalid. I expect that sorry, Ms. Sachs, I'm sorry about that. Mr. Green, I see your hands.
Excuse me.
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. So the only bone I have to pick, I would agree that if we're going to, make this the priority, we need to make the priority. I have a keen interest in hearing from Amazon on a whole host of issues. And I'm just, I threw you to the clerk. Oh, shoot. I don't know if you would know this, but when would be the next available opportunity to bring in the folks from Amazon, given this motion?
I have not. The expectation was that we were going to have the folks from Amazon here on the 16th.
On the 16th.
Sorry, 14th. The invitation has been sent out, but we haven't heard anything at this point in terms of commitment to appear. So I will tell you, Mr. Green, that the schedule is on Wednesday, that we have the ATIP study. We're continuing on that with representatives from the media. Next week, we've got the commissioners that have all committed to come in to talk about the supplementary estimates. And then on the 14th, we were going to return to the ATIP study. I'll remind the committee members as well that last week, we approved a motion to have the lobbying commissioner come in to talk about the proposed changes to the lobbyist rule of conduct. My expectation is that we're not going to get to that till January 30th at the earliest after the Christmas break, and then the schedule beyond that point hasn't been set to this point. So hang on a second. Yeah, I just updated on the invitation for the 14th, and that we haven't heard a response at this point. So, and I'm going to give it a couple more days, and then we'll determine where we're going to go from that point forward. Does that clarify anything for you, Mr. Green?
It does, and I would admit we're in a bit of a dog's breakfast with our work plan, right? And that's just the nature of shifting priorities, and I'm guilty of it. I'm certainly supportive of exploring some of this stuff. But I'll just share quite candidly in a vulnerable way. I'm a little bit torn between, how we're going to prioritize this in a way that does respect some of the other work that's happening, because that's also a priority of mine as well. So I'll just listen to the other comments and then see where we land.
Yep. Okay. Well, I appreciate that. And part of the challenges that we've been dealing with are witnesses availability as well. So, there's a lot of moving parts involved in some of the studies that have been approved by the committee as well. And I certainly know that the clerk and the analysts are trying their best to accommodate the will of the committee. So I don't see any further discussion on the amendment. So let's, Ms. Sachs.
If I may, through you, Mr. Chair, just to respond to Mr. Green. And I noted this in a prior meeting where witnesses who were quite vulnerable were brought to committee without a lot of planning and timing, and I agree with you, Mr. Green. I'd like to hear from Amazon as well, and we haven't heard from them yet. And perhaps in prioritizing this, since this is the issue of the day, it will allow us to really build the schedule out on issues that are important to you, like Amazon, and to make sure that we give witnesses the time to respond and plan, because as we saw in the last round of the ATIP, we had some vulnerable folks here, and testimony that was quite quick in the turnaround. So I think we can be mindful and careful in our planning, and I believe that this is really the issue of the day to committee members and also to Canadians. So, Mr. Green, I'd be more than happy to see us work on a well-planned schedule, work plan for after the break.
I don't see any further discussion. So on the amendment from Ms. Sachs, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Baines?
I vote yes.
Mr. Fergus?
Je vote en faveur.
Madame Hefner? Ms. Khalid?
I vote yes.
Ms. Sachs? Mr. Barrett?
No.
Mr. Berthold?
Nope.
Mr. Couric?
No. It's flashing green.
It's because your voice is so loud.
Je vote contre la motion.
Monsieur Villemur?
Je vote contre.
Mr. Green?
I vote for the motion.
Six yeas, 4 nays.
Okay, so the amendment carries. So I'm just gonna ask the committee for some indulgence on this, because I know that we have an ATIP study. Let me finish first. I'm going to ask for the committee's indulgence on this, because Wednesday we have witnesses that have been scheduled to appear for some time on Wednesday on the ATIP study. I know that there's a keen interest in their appearance and them wanting to appear in front of this committee. So what I would like is some indulgence from the committee, or some direction from the committee. If we can start this with the amendment, we still have to vote on these, but just keep in mind that if you do want to start this, that we can start this perhaps next week, because we're going to have difficulty getting witnesses here for Wednesday. Let's be frank. And I don't want to put the clerk, nor do I want to put the analysts in that position. Now, we haven't voted on the main motion, but I just throw that out there for the committee's consideration, okay? And I think it's a dutiful consideration as well. Mr. Fergus. And so we're on the main motion as amended at this point. So go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be very quick because I want to respect the time that you have, and I know that honorable colleagues have another engagement to go to. So this, I hope, will be very quick and will get a lot of support. I'd like to propose move one last motion. It's one that's important to me. It's one that we've seen that has the real consequences, or I should say the indirect but yet very real consequences of foreign interference, is that it has led to a lot of social divisions within our own country. On a vu des personnes.
We saw people, specifically when China was seen as a great villain, and the Chinese government seems to merit that title, but Chinese Canadians face xenophobic attacks. And we've seen that with other groups in our country as well. So I propose that one of our sessions of that study be spent on the following, and I sent this to the clerk. After interference, that we add and open quotation marks, that a meeting be spent on the increase of xenophobia in Canada.
At the end of the paragraph, after the word interference, add an open quotations that one meeting be dedicated to the rise of xenophobia in Canada. End of quotation.
Okay. You've shared that with the clerk?
Yes.
It's been distributed among the committee? Okay. We got to be mindful of time here. So Mr. Fergus has proposed an amendment. Mr. Villemure on the amendment. Oh, did you have your hand up, Mr. Barrett? I'm sorry, Mr. Barrett first, and then we'll go to Mr. Villemure afterwards. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I look very forward to debating this fourth or fifth or sixth amendment. But as noted by my honorable colleagues, there are multiple other engagements from members of the committee. I move to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. It's non-debatable, non-amendable. Do we have consensus to adjourn? We don't. Let's go to a vote, please. Madam Clerk, on the motion to adjourn.
Mr. Baines.
I vote no.
Mr. Fergus.
Vote contre.
Ms. Hepner. Ms. Khalid.
I vote no.
Ms. Sachs. Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Mr. Berthold.
Oui.
Mr. Couric.
I vote yes.
Mr. Villemure. Mr. Green. Mr.
I vote
Green.
yes.
Four yeas, 6 nays.
Okay, so the motion to adjourn fails. And I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Can I do that? As resources.
Usually it's 2 hours from the time you started. What time did we start?
So let's keep in mind, and the reason why I was mindful of this is that we do have a hard stop at 5:45 tonight. So just so everybody knows, and so I was hoping we could adjourn. The vote failed. We're going to continue. Mr. Fergus, your hand.
Mr. Chair, I'm hoping that we could vote on this amendment and then on the main motion without further debate.
Okay. So Mr. Fergus has moved the amendment on the one meeting. Mr. Couric on the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I do find it interesting. I would pose somewhat of a question, and then I may have a few further comments. But so I agree entirely that we have seen significant divisions that have taken place, and we've seen instances of xenophobia and racism that have unfortunately been directed towards
minority communities in this country. And I think that, in fact, speaking with, with a former colleague who lost the election, who lost re-election rather, in 2021, certainly who is it was incredible. Some of the stories, hearing from this colleague that I'd served with for, not quite a couple of years, just some of the instances of the racism that he had experienced, and in particular, because he took a fairly firm stand regarding some of these issues. My question would be the context of there being one meeting, it being prescriptive to one meeting. I'd be curious as to what that would look like in terms of the greater context of this study. Is it something that is meant to just ensure that we have perspectives heard, so that it provides that context from academics? Are we looking for election officials? I'm just curious as to, because we have the amended motion before us. So part of what I'd be curious in asking is that to ensure that certainly voting on this, it's a laudable intention, and I'd be very, very supportive of it. But if Mr. Fergus would outline maybe some of the examples of who might be included in witnesses in that meeting, so that can understand kind of what we're trying to get to here.
The question posed to you, Mr. Fergus, if you want to answer it, you're more than welcome to.
I am very reluctant to answer it because I'm afraid of the time running out for those who have commitments. All I can say would be up to members to determine, using the example of Mr. Couric or examples that other members can talk about. And it will be up to this membership to determine who would be the witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Fergus. Mr. Couric?
So I think that when it comes to ensuring that we have the full understanding of what I'm just hesitant to engage to proceed without a better understanding, because in the context of election interference, I think that this is totally reasonable in terms of some of the periphery discussion. And I'll use an example that is somewhat unrelated. I know that there's a committee undertaking a study currently on some abuse within sports in Canada. Very, very serious issue where they've had and having listened to some of the testimony and hearing some of the witnesses, it's just it is absolutely heartbreaking. So one of the meetings that they undertook had to do with the committee heard from experts, so that they and committee members, my understanding is, heard from experts related to trauma, that so that members knew how to appropriately ask questions. In some cases, making sure that although a very, very different subject matter, the reason why I bring this up is because in that case they had heard from experts who understood the details of trauma, so that they could equip members of that committee to better understand how they should be approaching the subject from the perspective of dealing with situations where there may be so that they wouldn't be re-victimized. And then further, to provide supports for members of the committee, because quite traumatic some of the language that has been heard. So my question in asking is there's precedent that I can certainly think of that fits within this. However, I'm curious as to if we want to look at examples where there was xenophobia, some of the causes of that, was that some of the interference that is being referenced, to add this as a specific element of it, just for some more guidance as to what that might look like, I think would be a helpful element to ensure that we are just better understanding. And I know there are people of color and minority groups around this table. And I think that certainly they've experienced things that I cannot necessarily directly relate with. So Mr. Chair, through you, the question would be is I'm just trying to better understand in the context of the motion that we have before us, it would be, is it something that's directly related to the report, or is it something that is meant to help this committee understand some of the greater challenges that exist in this space so that we are not finding ourselves in the position where there is where members of this committee from any party, from any background, end up putting themselves in a place where it would be not understanding where certain individuals within our society may find some challenges. So I would pose that question. Is it directly related to the study and to be included in the report, or is it more for the knowledge and understanding of members of this committee to understand where things are coming from?
Well, I thank you for that question, Mr. Couric, and I have to advise the committee that because of resource limitations, we had been granted an extra 14 minutes, which would take us to 5:44. We're at that point right now. So I have no other option at this point but to adjourn the meeting. So the meeting is adjourned.